This week, we've had the pleasure of living with Diego, a volunteer at Tree Elbow University. Diego contacted us about a year ago, and it took a while for him to arrive here. And we are so grateful that he did. Um, I wondered whether we could start by just hearing a little bit of your background story, where you're from, some of the things you've been studying and learning, and some of the places you've traveled to and lived, and yeah, just a little about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, it's been a pleasure as well being this week with you guys.
Mm.
Absolute pleasure.
Mm. Thank you.
My name is Diego. I come from Colombia. I arrived in Australia 8 years ago, and I came here when I was 30 years. Before coming to Australia, all my life I lived in Colombia, and I did my studies. I went through high school at the same school in a Catholic only boys school,
Mm.
and then when I was 17, I I studied medicine in Antiochia's University in the medical school of Antiochia's University, which is my state
Mm.
public university.
Mm.
In Colombia, you do this for six and a half years, depending the university. My university was 6.5 years, 13 semesters, and then you graduate.
Mhm.
The last year prior to graduating, you do the internship, which is basically a month. Uh, every month you go through a different specialty or a different area of medicine. Basically, you go through some of them compulsory, and then you have four that you can choose in that last year. By the end of that year, you get graduated, and in Colombia, for you to get the number, the registration or the license number,
Mhm.
you have to do a rural year. They call it a social service year.
Right.
So usually you do it in a rural hospital,
Yeah.
which means a small first level hospital. First level meaning that it's the most basic primary care hospital.
Yeah.
Third level being the biggest hospital, including ICUs, transplants,
Right.
hemodialysis, all these things.
Mhm.
So I did that rural year in a in an interesting area, in an interesting place, not too far from Antioquia's capital, which is Medellin. The town is called San Rafael, like Saint
Mhm.
Raphael,
Mhm.
and it was a really rich experience. That's basically when you learn, even though you're already graduated, that's when you learn because you from the first shift you are the doctor of the hospital and you are in charge of the whole hospital during
Wow.
that shift. So because it's a primary care hospital, there's emergency, basic emergencies, and then the primary care aspect of the hospital where you uh, um, do the prenatal controls,
Mm.
and you do the hypertension and diabetic programs.
Mm.
Also, you do general medicine office, um, and you also include the primary care aspect in pediatrics. So you
Mm.
also participate in prevention of diseases and promotion of health
Mm.
in kids.
Mm.
So
Wow.
I did that for that year, and after that year, I mean, you get your license, so that means that you can now go to the city and work in the city.
Yeah.
So that service, that first year is basically a way, a measurement that the government has to trying to decentralize
Yeah.
the health access. So
Yeah.
people from the towns have an ongoing
Mm.
um,
Mm.
supply of doctors every year because you have to go there first
Yeah.
in order if you want to work in the city at some point. Of course, you can keep yourself working there, but
Mm.
most of people
Mm.
we are we want to go back to the cities and become doctors in the cities, or just start our postgraduate and our specialties if we're interested in that.
Mm.
So I did that. I went to a second hospital, a second level hospital. So
Mm.
again, a third one being the most specialized, high level complex hospital. So second is something in between where you have basic specialists like surgeons, pediatricians,
Mhm.
orthopedic surgeons, gynecology and obstetrics, anesthetics, of course, and in my case, I had access to ICUs,
Mhm.
and this was also a psychiatric clinic,
Mm.
the biggest psychiatric clinic in the area that I was in. So I was an emergency doctor. GPs in Colombia can work as emergency doctors in any hospital, so that was my role. So
But your specialty was as a GP.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
still a GP, and
Yeah.
that's the only thing I did as a
Yeah.
GP. And then yeah, I worked 3 years in this hospital. Um,
Mm.
it was a private Catholic hospital,
Mhm.
so yeah, I would receive the emergencies of body, so to speak, of body emergencies like body issues, but also
Mhm.
mental issues because it was the psychiatric clinic. So we would take the psychiatric emergency as well.
Mm.
GPs are the first line of attention there.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great introduction to this talk. I think we spoke yesterday about recording a podcast after speaking about the industrial medical system and its problems and its the challenges of people's health at the moment, which we will get to. I'd like to unpack that a bit more with you um, in a cross-cultural way. But one of the things that I guess why listeners come to this podcast is or our website is to learn more about permaculture transitions. And so at some point between your medical education in a formal university setting and then your practice in a medical institution and um, some life experience, some big life experience, which we might get to as well. You arrive in Sydney, oh, sorry, Melbourne,
I arrived in Perth.
in
I
Perth.
was I was 11 months in Perth, where
Yeah,
I was basically studying English because I didn't know much English by then.
yeah.
At least not in the ways of speaking and listening. I
Mm.
used to read a lot,
Mhm.
especially because in uni, if you want to be updated, and because Europe and United States are the countries with the most input output in research
Mhm.
and guidelines, if you want to keep up with the rhythm and being updated and being a good practitioner, quote unquote good practitioner,
Mhm.
if you want the fresh stuff, it's better if you read in English. So I had a good reading English, but a practical English in the real world was definitely something that I needed to work in, and that's what I did in Perth.
Mm.
Then Perth became a bit boring, and I had some friends in Melbourne, so
Mhm.
they invited me to
Mm.
come and live the
Mm.
the eastern side of Australia.
And what brought you to Australia? What was the seed or the pull?
That's a really good question because it all comes to basically what I was feeling ethically and professionally. Being working in the area for 4 years, plus the background of university, I started having some dilemmas, ethical dilemmas of what I was doing and for
Mhm.
whom I was doing this. I started realizing how damaging for the planet humanity has become. And so being able to realize that the modern medical practices not only were prolonging the lifespan of humans,
Mhm.
which is not necessarily bad, but we're prolonging the lives of humanity, which in turn it was it's damaging the planet,
Mm.
not only intentionally, but through the ways of medicine. We are increasing longevity and in a no a non-resilient longevity, if we can say that. So I
Mm.
started having all these dilemmas. Who am I saving here? Am I saving humans that after they leave the hospital, they go and keep destroying the planet? And
Mm.
actually my practice is destroying the planet. Where are all these medicines coming from? Where all these laboratories, all the energy that is
Mm.
making these medicines.
I think just like one point there that I've been very aware of is reading studies about how many tons of medical waste there has been just in the pandemic years, and like just thinking of the tonnage of medical masks and or needles and like the weight and volume of creating this huge anthropogenic pollution event um, uh, based on a virus that most likely was engineered in a lab to be more pathogenic in people. A gain of function exercise for the vaccine industry to work out how to get the comms in order to produce the antidote,
Yeah.
the lucrative antidote. And so those kinds of examples about the insanity of and hubris of what I call industry science as opposed to science, where the difference is industry science is money directed and profiteer and stock market directed, and science is independent, is actually like what science should be,
Yeah.
inquiry. So it's almost become invisible that particularly experts whose wages are dependent on it, um, that there is a collapse, a total collapse from industry science into science, and just calling it all the science. And this is my biggest problem with medical science, particularly. I feel like capture of doctors in Australia is because doctors come out with a huge amount of debt on their shoulders. And when you're incarcerated by debt, you're less likely to ask questions about your industry. But so I asked you, what did your degree cost you? Do you want to talk about, like, there is similarities that you're seeing in Australia with the modern medical system, but also there's some differences as well.
Yeah. There's definitely similarities, as I told you before. We in Colombia, our medical system is completely westernized.
Westernized, yeah.
So our guidelines and practices are totally 100% based on what Europe and USA determine, because they have the biggest um, entities of every aspect of medicine. They have the European Cardiology Association and then the American Heart Association, and then you can take that to every aspect, endocrinology, gynecology, all of them.
Mm.
They are the main input in research, and therefore the guidelines get spread all over the world, and we base our practice in those guidelines,
Mm.
sometimes accounting for differences in population, because after the guidelines or including the guidelines, they try to account for the South American population behaves like this, Asian populations behave like that, but it's basically them determining that. So the similarities are, I haven't practiced in Australia, but I've been a patient in Australia, so I can see how is a copy. It's a copy of the system in Colombia.
Yeah.
In the university system, there's difference, as I might say, even though I don't know much about Australia. In my case, because being from a public university, I paid almost zero. My whole bachelor was almost $0,
Wow.
which is not the case for everyone. It's actually out of luck,
Mm.
but A big part of the public universities are funded by the government, so you have access to free education or a cheaper education. But the majority of doctors, I might say, at this day and age,
Hmm.
they're coming out of private universities, which describe the phenomenon that you just
Right.
said, which everyone just get in massive debts because
Mm.
it's really expensive every semester. So they come out of university just with the mindset of paying the debt. Some of them actually studying the specialty or the postgraduate course immediately after, which means in Colombia you don't get paid for that. In Australia you do.
Mm.
You don't get paid by that, so the debt is even deeper by the time you come out of your postgraduate course.
Mm. Yeah, um, I guess a follow-up question would be, do you feel like not having the debt made it easier for you to leave something you didn't believe in anymore?
Absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. I was, and I still am for some of my colleagues, friends, colleagues,
Yeah.
the hero who was able to do it. To me, they're the heroes that
Mm.
had to stay there. I
Mm.
had the choice and the fortune and the support of my parents to say, yeah, we gave you the study, we supported you while you were in uni. You pretty much paid yourself uni because I was working. That's why it was free for me. I mean, I was working for the university. That's why the fees were
Yeah.
zero. So you can do whatever you want. And so there was definitely a big part of
Yeah.
fortune and
Mm.
privilege in being able to live
Mm.
and quit my career, at least for
Yeah.
for good time. Yeah.
And what I've noticed across all professions, like particularly white collar or expert class professions, is that in Australia, you leave university with a large debt, and you immediately go into debt servicing. And I think socially and politically, this has had a huge impact on this country. I'm fascinated by how big big finance has wrapped its tendrils around the university systems, like it has big uh, pharma and big money has wrapped itself around the medical industry. Richard Horton, the former editor of the Lancet, wrote in 2004, medical journals have devolved into a money laundering operation for the pharmaceutical industry, or something to those words. I'm not sure if you want
Yeah, it goes even actually back in time. In 1966, I reckon, and then later in 1980, the same psychiatrist, I think his last name is Adler,
to. Hmm.
R.M. Adler. He
Hmm.
wrote two articles, so actually two articles that were published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which is one of the biggest journals in medicine. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's index number one even. He started realizing this, that
Mm.
the how the capital was starting to infiltrate
Mm.
and get closely involved in determining the decisions of the subjects that were studied in the different universities in the United States, and
Mm.
how the model of profit and the model of medicine based in pharmacology was
Mm.
totally biasing or affecting the way the practice was made. So
Mm.
this is, yeah, we go back in time, even half a century of people being aware and
Mm.
exposed in the same medical journals.
Yeah. My family doctor growing up, Dr. Mackenzie, was this lovely guy that would come and visit myself and my siblings when we were sick. And that's when doctors did house visits. And rather than take a sick child into uh, a medical practice and
Yeah.
with everyone else's, yeah, keep the child in bed. And I had this experience. So this, I'm 55, and so probably from about 1975 when I was 5 years of age. I was, I wasn't the healthiest kid. I was the kid that was always sick in my family and would be prone to colds and flus. And so I had this charming, funny, he'd always make me laugh, and a doctor that would come, and there was huge amounts of love. Like reflecting back, I just think there was a lot of love in the way he showed up and the way he doctored. And his main prescription was that boy, he turned to my mum, that boy needs 4 days in bed, or he needs 3 days in bed, or he needs a week in bed, and you could do this and this. And my mum would know all the other doctoring things, the honey and lemon drinks. And so there was no farmer intersecting in that relationship. It was just an authority figure confirming to the parent that this boy needs deep rest, deep sleep. That is the medicine. And so this is the positive view of doctoring that I had. And I also have it to this day. My sister-in-law, Jackie, is a palliative care doctor, and there's deeply caring person. It's not, yeah, this is the thing where I separate those like in the education system or the medical system are real people, but it's the institution which is colonial by structure and capitalist in its nature that actually deranges the well-meaning, well-intentioned people from not being able to either teach or to heal. And so this is inherently the problem. But with so many people's lives dependent on servicing a debt from the beginning, and then the debt of mortgage and the debt of living a modern life, just generally, it just accrues and accrues. And I think that's where people's critical faculties switch off in terms of what is it that they're serving. And I think that your critical faculties about your industry got you to this week with us in a way. It's been a path, and I'd love to hear more about that. Like you got to Australia, and ended up in Perth. You were invited across to Melbourne. Um, what happened then?
That's a profound question because reflecting back on those years, the things that pushed me away from the industrial medicine complex um, are the same structures that we live in the world.
Mm,
I I left uni and I left my career just to land in this world of abundance and capital and work. And so in some ways I wasn't critical enough. I was just critical enough to live my career, but I
mhm,
I never had a north. I never had a north star. I never knew where to go. I never knew any different from my environment, which was the same uh, capital world where it's about consumption and you work and you keep yourself in debt, acquiring things that you don't need. And so it's interesting because somehow I was critical enough to see that so easy in my, well, it took me maybe 13 years to see that, but I just landed and I just started having a regular job because in Australia you make good money, or at least back then it was even easier,
mhm,
just 8 years ago when rent was not it was already exponentially going up, but definitely cheaper. And I landed in this comfort zone when I had a bartender job and I was able to pay my student visa fees and make a living. So it took me another good 6, maybe 5 years to realize the path that I wanted to follow and connecting that to this week, which started happening maybe 2 years ago or maybe three, with actually during COVID, being able to be in that crisis and enclosed in my house because of the regulations and because of the psychotic mentality the collective had when we were in lockdown that pushed me to, now you have to do something, Diego, and what can you do? So I started coming across videos of permaculture, the concept of permaculture, realizing that I was living in Buren and that was just in one of the cores of the practice, and I was just close to all these people. So that was an eye opener. COVID was that transition of like, yeah, like a final slap. Like, yeah, you've been following a path, maybe slowly, but this is, I saw the north. I saw, there's a way. I don't have to keep myself working in the complex, doing this maybe not meaningful job, but there's ways, and there's people already getting there and connecting us back with what is ancestral and the ways of living that has nothing to do with profit or capital or money, but with a different region, a different wealth, and a different alternative economies, and an alternative of everything of what it was to me to that point, everything that existed, which was the capital ways of doing everything.
It seems that in 2020 at least, permaculture landed in people's feeds as a kind of hopeful twist of the algorithm of before I feel like the fear factories really got to work once the vaccine was made and the shaming units and the division, the dividing in the community around choices, medical choices, and the whole my body, my choice rule book in the left of the politics was ripped up. And uh, yeah, so the algorithm was allowing these positive stories, and we were inundated with interest, and we were making lots of how-to videos, and a lot of people found our work at that point. And permaculture generally was there was optimism and excitement that I felt. And in that time in Australia, in that year, there's like no one died from this so-called pandemic. Then things shifted. You, I think in 2021, one of your jobs was riding a bike or a motorbike, Uber Eats across the city, across a
Yeah.
vacant city, inhabiting the streets. Do you want to just talk a bit about your experience as delivering this industrial food to people who were at home ordering stuff and Uber and Amazon? There was a massive wealth transfer at this time, and you're in the service of that.
Yeah, I during at the beginnings of COVID, I was living in Melbourne, and and I was still a student, a foreign student, so we didn't have any support from the government. And because everything was shut, we needed to work somehow. So a lot of us, by us, I mean students, foreign students, um, could only see, because many of us working in the hospitality industry and the construction industry, which were regarded as not essential, and fair enough. We lost our jobs in the meanwhile. So that was one of those available essential jobs, not hard to get into, especially because I didn't know many people around. I didn't have a big social circle, so I didn't have any contacts to access to different jobs.
Yeah.
So I started doing Uber Eats with my brother, and it, I mean, reflecting on that time, I'm really grateful that we had the chance to do it, but we were doing a lot of, we were probably doing 40, 50 hours a week, and we were getting less than $200 in that week. It was, you ended up working days of sometimes 8 to 10 hours, and then at the end of the day you had $60 in your account, and it was like, whoa, this is
And this
the
is riding a bike.
yeah, right, riding the bike, which was not different from having a motorbike or having a car. We actually talking to our Uber Eats fellas,
In terms of
they
the speed of,
yeah,
yeah,
there
yeah,
was not much difference. They actually were spending money on
yeah,
finally registrations
yeah.
and fuel.
But you're expending your own bodily fuel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah,
that's,
you buy yourself the food, and you are, of course,
mm,
because we were really up. My brother and I, we were up in the morning, so going through part of the winter, because the peak hours are the hours that you can do more money. So you go through breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So breakfast and dinner were really hard on the body, because you have to be out there waiting, and most of the time you're waiting, you're not doing the job. You wait in a corner close to the restaurants, waiting for the app to beep so
mm,
you can pick up the job. So that back then I was still in this anxiety mode of rejection of my life, and what am I doing here? What am I doing in Australia?
mm,
Like, what did I come here for? Like, oh yeah, you came fleeing your country and your career because you were fed up with the system, but you just landed in a more cruel and explicit system. So what are you doing? What are you doing here? And for a long time I didn't have the answer. I just kept pushing and getting the deliveries, and eventually coming out of lockdowns and landing back again in hospitality, and feeling okay with the amount of money that I had, but definitely always with that lack of meaning that gets you, especially when you're transitioning from the 20s to the 30s. And what am I doing here? My family is over there. Yeah, my brother is here, but what am I doing? I'm doing exactly the same as I was doing as a doctor, polluting, just taking without any regards for where all this money and all this food and all this energy is coming from.
mm. So the last 3 years, it sounds like those questions, uh, the doubt of what you're doing, um, exiting things that weren't serving you, but not necessarily, as you say, knowing where you're going, but knowing what you're leaving behind. I'm just fascinated to go into deeper into the materiality of the last 3 years.
I think is what you're saying, like finally understanding. I always knew the things that I wanted to go away from,
Mhm.
but you definitely need to see some light and some figure at the end of the other end.
Yeah.
You know that you're getting away from all that you clearly know by experience and by first experience knowing, but you definitely need to see where at least a bit of light where you're going to. Otherwise, you're just gonna keep yourself in the dark. So see, watching the videos and landing in a town where there were a bit of um, gardens where you could see people growing food, that started and that started that path of, oh yeah, okay, yeah, of course. If
Mm.
you're flying away from buying food, then you will need to grow your own food.
Mm.
If you're flying away from having to buy everything, then start like realizing what your real needs are. So it's taken me 3 years to um really shape and yeah, put a shape and put a form in the path that I wanna follow. But in saying that, I know where I'm going now, but I'm still in that path. I find myself in some middle way where I haven't been able to finally um, materialize things,
Mm.
because for the last year I was living in Melbourne and I was living in Coburg, and I started growing my own food there and having, the best experience of like, that happiness that you get when you get your first yields. That actually it's a happiness that you don't lose. Like
Mm.
you keep yielding and having your harvest, and every time it's just equally, if not much better.
Mm.
But then I knew that I was stuck in this backyard in Coburg growing my own food, and that I needed to scale this up
Mm.
because food is important but wasn't everything. There was this lack of community that was feeling
Mm.
like I can't, I just can't survive
Oh.
with this produce that I'm growing myself. I definitely need community, not only to expand my knowledge, expand my experience, expand my love, expand my even the produce itself.
Mm.
And that's when I decided to leave Coburg to start getting first-hand experience in permaculture and
Mm.
eco-village
Mm.
or community knowledge through practice. Because up to that moment, I had already watched all the videos.
Yeah.
I had
Yeah.
already read the big titles in permaculture and all the small titles, so to speak, as well.
Mm.
But definitely, I needed the practice because it's funny how the university had that impact on me,
Mm.
making me think that you can achieve everything by reading a book, because
Mm.
that's the medical practice. Even though there's
Mm.
practical things you do with your hands as a GP,
Mhm.
most of it is knowledge in
Mhm.
the ways of writing and books that you then apply to people, um, quote unquote, by giving them what they need in a medicine or a drug. So it's been a long journey to realize where I'm going to, and the ways and the means to. And since March, I started the practical experience. So I've been basically monthly or every 2 weeks
Mhm.
changing the farm or the place that I'm in.
Mhm.
I built an itinerary where I was able to choose the hosts that I wanted. So I've
Right.
been, yeah, in different permaculture places, but also places with different practices like deep ecology and syntropic agroforestry, which you might argue has like some crossovers with permaculture in
Mhm.
the ways of practice.
Sure.
And then I'm about to go back to Colombia to start my community and finally integrate everything in the same place for a long time.
Yeah. And I'd like to hear a bit about that. It sounds like there's 10 of you.
Yeah, so wrapping everything that we've been talking about, realizing the potential that I had and the potential that people around myself had, and the potential of what permaculture means to me.
Mhm.
Pretty much, I see myself or ourselves as the key, and I see permaculture as the keyhole that you
Mhm.
that's what you find. And when you connect, when you being the key, getting the keyhole, you open this beautiful door of reconnection and going back to the land
Mhm.
and leaving, crossing the door and leaving behind all these things that I've been flying away from.
Mhm.
I I can see how this in my community represents all the big journey. So we, as you said before, we are ten people, divided in five private spaces
Mhm.
in a huge communal space. A huge, I mean 6 hectares. For us, it's
Yeah.
quite a while because most of us have been always living in the cities or in
Mhm.
smaller spaces, definitely. So we have five constellations. Every constellation is composed by two people. In my case, I'm with my brother, and then the eighth others are really good friends. Some of them friends, long-term friends, 20, 25 years ago.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of diversity in the group, of course. And every couple has their own particularities and their own idiosyncrasies,
Yeah.
and we get in we just connected to permaculture through permaculture, and we landed in this common space where we know where we want to be.
Mm.
And we finally can see that even though I'm not there yet, um, from day zero, I know already that I'm gonna start the practice, and I'm gonna be living in the land, finally understanding what a parent means, and being able to read some patterns in the land, in the weather, even in the energies of the people that I'm gonna be sharing with my community, and feeling strong and feeling hopeful and feeling that the practice that I've been doing and the theoretical work, which is important. We live in this age of so much information that would be silly to say that we can completely disregard that. We definitely need that theoretical aspect to get out of
Mm.
the industrial complex, I guess.
Mm.
Um, yeah, that's what I see, and that's what I hope for, and feeling the safety and feeling the confidence that now I have so many role models, including yourselves, and in the inspiration of everything that's been happening in the last 2 years, especially in the last year, landing there and knowing that, yeah, I don't know exactly how it's gonna look. There's some aspects that I know that I'm definitely going towards, like food sovereignty, water sovereignty. Um, yeah, just having the confidence that I know that I'm in a good place to start my
Mm.
community, and somehow taking the role of the leader sometimes, because that we're aware of that of the skills that everyone has in the community, and we're happy to be always handing over the leadership whenever the need comes.
Yeah. The beautiful thing about permaculture is that the inspiration is more like a basket than a guru or a platform or a podium. Because we've had a few discussions about this, about how our wounds have and how our suffering moments have been great teachers in terms of, yeah, I guess opening to the grief that we've had, that we've held, that we've experienced. Um, I just wondered whether you want to speak to how your griefs have orientated you in your life and in your choices.
I think grief is another representation, or is in the same spectrum that empathy. I'm not I'm not I'm not sure if I'm able to say that they might be in the duality of things, but definitely through grief, and which is related to loss
Mm.
and suffering. It's the way we learn how to see the other when they're in the trouble.
Mm.
And grief has been a big teacher, because has has taught me empathy, and how to be kind to the other through my own grief, and understand that even the what to my eyes seems to be my to our eyes, what seems to be silly things, and get over it, and you're suffering for nothing. Being able to realize how important everyone's journey is,
Mm.
and through grief and empathy, I devoted myself to others, and I'm in a place where I'm able to listen to others in a more conscious way, and in a more
Mm.
open way of realizing that everyone's just everyone's journey is as important as mine,
Mm.
and not because my loss and my suffering seems to be bigger or deeper means that I can disregard or dismiss the other person. So
Mm.
grief is part of life. Grief is a great teacher. grief send us to the other pole of empathy and positivism and help the other through our own experience. Yeah.
Beautiful. Mm. I wish you great abundance stepping in to your next chapter, returning to your ancestral land, gathering with friends, 2,000 meters above sea level in your 6 hectares. I and Meg and Woody and others who have met you here look forward to following your journey and to see what unfolds. And hopefully one day we'll reconnect again, and we will definitely reconnect again, but we will sit face to face and share a yarn.
Yeah.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I don't hope, I'm sure that I'm gonna be still in touch with you and taking you through my journey and showing you the steps that I've been taking in the sense of getting even closer to you. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks, bye.